I thank the ranking member. I want to go back to another statutory requirement in FSOC, and I read, just paraphrase it here, facilitate coordination among member agencies regarding policy development and rulemakings. And recently, the CFTC and the SEC issued rules on swap execution facilities. And the CFTC proposed that requests for quotes be sent to at least 5 SEFs. The SEC required 1 request for quote. Is that the kind of coordination policy that meets the spirit of Dodd-Frank, Mr. Cook?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think when one looks at the CEF rule and on all the other rules, ultimately they've been the outcome of a lot of consultation and discussion across the 2 agencies. We've had some joint roundtables together. There's lots of active dialogue. Now, there are some differences in some of the rules, and I think we've only proposed them at this stage, and we need to go back and consider the comment that we've gotten. There may be some differences that are borne out by difference in products and or difference in the trading characteristics of the market. I think most would agree that those are legitimate differences and important differences to maintain. There may be other differences in our rules that reflect a different understanding of the facts of the markets or a different understanding of a different approach to the policy. And I think on those, as we move forward with the adoption stage, we need to be in very close coordination and make sure we understand what's the nature of those differences and try to bring them as close together as possible.
And here's a question, and I'm going to let Mr. Gensler respond. But, I mean, y'all are both working on the same issue. I mean, why would, before, if we're to facilitate coordination among member agencies, why wouldn't, before those rules are put out, would y'all not coordinate and come up with a consistent regulation? I think, again, this is a part of the credibility of this, and so it from my perspective, it doesn't sound like that FSOC is meeting the spirit of some of the statutory duties here if we're not doing that. We have other examples. We've got the FDIC with an overdraft policy. I don't know what the OCC's policy is going to be on that, but it looks like to me there ought to be some dialogue going on so that we're all singing from the same book, because these kinds of things have implications on our financial markets, and the consequences aren't just to these entities, but ultimately to the financial markets as a whole. So, Mr. Gensler, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I think that in fact we have at the CFTC done just what you've said. We've had nearly 600 meetings with fellow regulators. We shared, starting last September, all of our internal drafts, term sheets, and so forth on the specific rules that you're referring to. It's mostly with the SEC, but the Federal Reserve has been a terrific partner, as well as the FDIC and OCC, on many of our rules. And on the specific rule, there are some differences in the underlying statute and trading patterns in the futures markets and the securities markets. We have jurisdictions, for instance, on interest rate swaps that have different characteristics than some of the equity or credit default swaps that the SEC will have. Again, as Mr. Cook said, this is just a proposal, but they were very aware, and we were very aware of this swap execution facility rule. We won't get much credit for it in this hearing. Well over 90% of it's the same and very similar language and text, but you're right, there is this difference on request for quotes, and we've got a lot of comments on it. There are probably hundreds of comments on it. We're going to take that into consideration as we go towards considering final rules this summer and fall.
So the question is who's in charge of FSOC?
The Secretary of the Treasury is the chairman of FSOC, and the FSOC has some very specific statutory oversight on rulemaking. So, for example, coordination of the Volcker Rule, implementation, coordination of risk retention. In addition, the FSOC has been a very important body for discussions of this sort, for collaboration and coordination. Ultimately, the decision on something like this is is the SEC and the CFTC, but I think that the FSOC can and will play an important role in being a forum to help achieve consistency, which I think all of us would share is an important objective.
Well, I would agree with you that, but I think what we need here is some leadership from that position, in that it's obviously we're not necessarily accomplishing the goal here, and I think if otherwise we sold that we were going to, that Dodd-Frank would bring some consolidation to the regulatory process and not bring additional confusion and another layer there. And if that coordination is going to be an integral part of that, and it's not happening, then we failed here. And so I think another message we want to send back is that these kinds of differences hopefully would be worked out before we get out with these regulations, rather than after, where then we confuse. If market certainty is one of the roles of government, and transparency and integrity, but certainty is another piece of it, we have to bring more certainty than we're bringing. And what we've heard this hearing today is we maybe not be helping the certainty piece of it much. With that, I go back to the gentleman from Massachusetts.